Welcome to this conversation about relaxation. I'm here today with two teachers who teach with us at Within Meditation, Shundo David Haye and Tessa Jonson. And we're going to be exploring this topic for the next hour. But before we dive into that, Tessa, I would love it if you would lead us in a couple minutes of a grounding meditation to help us come into the present moment together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hannah. So just find a position that serves you right now. Maybe you'd like to lean back or get some extra cushions or more coverage so that your body temperature is regulated. So take care of those external needs, and then just letting yourself settle. Maybe physically, maybe mentally, just noticing what you need right now to help you be more tuned into this moment in time. It might be nice, like I just did, to have a big sigh or a couple settling breaths. Really tuning into the way you feel in this moment, the way the body feels, the way the mind is functioning, and the way the natural breath is arriving and leaving. No judgment or control or change of this necessary. Just notice what's already here, what's present, and what's happening. And now just to start to shift a little bit more inwardly, we can take a few longer exhales just to help transition more into a calmer state. So maybe elongating the exhale slowly and longly. Maybe you'd like to hum, have a little vibration. Whatever feels right, just to soften the exhale. And with each softening breath, let it help to soften you, your body, your mind. So maybe the shoulders can give into gravity a little, floating down the back, away from the ears. Maybe the whole face can go slack and heavy, releasing tension from the eyes, the jaw especially. Really surrendering to gravity. Letting the breath be natural again, so no more elongation of the exhale. And just notice how the breath naturally wants to flow. And then coming back to the surface, you might like to wiggle the fingers, or let the head roll side to side. Just start to introduce a little bit of gentle movement. Maybe reaching the arms out or wide or overhead. And just taking a moment to conclude this little mini practice. In whatever way feels right to you, maybe setting an intention for this time, sending yourself or this place or those around you some gratitude and compassion, whatever feels good to you. And then letting the eyes begin to flicker open, taking your time to join back here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. I'd love to start the conversation by having each of you introduce yourselves and share whatever you'd like to share about yourself as a teacher, as a meditator, or in relation to this topic, whatever you'd like to kick off with. Let's start with you, Tessa.
Sure. I'm Tessa. I'm a teacher here at Within, and I specialize particularly in a relaxation meditation practice called Yoga Nidra from a yogic tradition, which we're going to dive into. That is a guided practice. So it's very beginner friendly and very much relaxation oriented. So it really helps you to tap into the softer part of yourself. So whether that's like your parasympathetic nervous system or just being able to be a little bit more calm and present, or even just have a nap. A lot of times people fall asleep, and that's an important part as well, of just making sure that you're rested and relaxed so that you can move beyond the external and more deeper into your internal realm. So that's the style of meditation I really like to work with. And I come to that practice from a yogic background. So I started this journey from an asana practice, from what we think of as yoga in the West, from a movement practice. And then that's kind of, as I've dove deeper into the yoga tradition, learning more and more about what yoga really is and how it's actually not very much about the movement, but much more about the stillness and recognizing the internal parts of yourself and building that relationship with yourself. So that's what I like to do, and that's what I like to help other people do. And I think we'll be talking quite a bit about that today.
Great, thank you, Tessa. How about you, Shundo?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Shundo. I train in the Zen tradition, which isn't necessarily very beginner friendly because the meditation is completely unguided. You're just left there in silence. And it took me quite a few years of training to kind of realize what the Zen style of meditation really had to offer. And most of that was physical in my understanding of it. So I'll be talking about that, and I'm very interested in how meditation and yoga arose together in human culture, and I'm very happy we'll be talking about that. So I did residential Zen training for about 15 years, including 5 years of monastic training, and I take that out into the world wherever I can, and I'm very happy to be offering Zen meditation on Within, and I also do a lot of mindful hiking, and that's something we might get into. That's, I think, if people don't like sitting down, hiking and walking is actually a wonderful meditation as well.
Great. Thank you both so much. I'm so delighted you're both here. And you've already started sort of skirting this topic, but I'd love for us to talk a little bit about what we're talking about here. Like what do we say when we talk about relaxing? And that word can mean a lot of different things to different people. And I'm curious to hear from both of you about what does that word mean to you? And when you think of relaxing, what is it that is happening in your body, in your mind, that makes it relaxation? So whichever one of you wants to jump in first, go for it.
Well, I think of relaxing as like an inner state of peace, just that experience of being rather than doing or thinking or moving. Well, we'll talk about that, but that inner experience of just being. So like that flow state almost in some respects, but also again, that relationship with yourself, when you're one with yourself and with something bigger than you as well. I think that's, to me, what relaxing is when I feel that, like, that inner peace and that sense of tranquility and knowing, kind of a lot of words kind of edging toward the same thing, but also slightly different, but just that removal of everything that I think of as me, and that returning to the one true part of me and then that connection, building that connection. I do find it hard to put into words sometimes, but hopefully that helps a little.
Well, actually, I can offer another word in that realm, which is alignment. That's the word I like to use.
Mm,
And sometimes that's just literally a physical alignment, just kind of physically feeling at ease. And then sometimes it's a mental alignment, just feeling at ease with what you have going on,
mm,
the amount of stuff that you have to deal with. So a couple of weeks ago, I had to give a talk to a group in England where I'm from, and I noticed that before I give a talk, I'm usually going, oh, I've got to give this talk, and I have this kind of pressure that I put on myself to like get it done, even though it's hard to make it happen. And once I gave the talk and it was over, I just kind of, okay, now I can deal with everything else I have to deal with, which is much more like, okay, I feel that everything is kind of lined up and at ease. I was also thinking there are other, ways that we can think about relaxation. So I love to watch soccer or football, and the season in England is just about to start, and the Women's World Cup is on right now. And so for me, like sitting down and watching a game of soccer on my computer is like super relaxing. But then we can kind of tip into, a tuning out or a zoning out, which I've sometimes heard referred to as narcotization, and there's a subtle difference in, this aware and kind of mindful relaxation, like feeling in the flow state, as Tessa was saying, and this kind of like, I just need to tune out for a while, which is a very valid
mhm.
response to, that we need to engage, bring up in our lives sometimes.
Yeah, that makes me think that for people who are not practicing meditation or yoga, or another practice that brings you mindfully into the state of relaxation, often relaxation is code for tuning out, is code for, oh well, I'm gonna get drunk, or I'm gonna binge watch, or I'm gonna like whatever it is that allows you to tune out. So I'm very curious about this space that you're both describing, about how about relaxed awareness, rather than relaxed tuning out. So I'd love to talk more about the two traditions that both of you referred to, that you've grown out of, that your practice has grown out of, and the relationship to this idea of relaxed awareness, as I'm calling it, whatever other words you want to use. So Shundo, why don't you start out by talking about that from your perspective?
Right. So yeah, as far as I understand it, and I'm not a scholar or much of an anatomist or anything like that, but from my own experience of doing Zen practice, the traditional meditation posture as it arose, a couple of thousand years ago, I would say, and it arose alongside meditation. I know Tessa's going to talk about alongside yoga. I know Tessa's going to talk about the yoga side. Was um, designed, now whether this was instinctual or whatever it was that caused this to be a thing. The traditional cross-legged meditation posture is really incredibly helpful at allowing the body to arrive at a certain place, or a certain state. And the Zen tradition places a lot of emphasis on posture. You can see, if you ever see pictures of Japanese monks in meditation, they're all incredibly beautifully aligned and upright. And you can't see it head on, but I'm actually kind of tucking my chin in towards my throat, which is one of those little things that, you don't necessarily think about, but actually makes a big difference with the weight of your head over your neck and this kind of thing. So as I spent many hours in meditation at the monastery and at the temple, I just kind of internally became aware of how the correctness of the posture really helped promote this relaxed awareness, even without any guidance. Eventually you kind of hopefully come to realize it for yourself, whether it's just, I say, on an instinctive physical level, or kind of understanding a little bit more about the mechanics. And certainly as I've started teaching meditation over the years, I have a basic understanding of the mechanics that work, the biomechanics. And it is a lot to do with the two different nervous systems that we have. And I know there are, contemporary teachers who talk a lot about the balancing the two nervous systems. And again, articulating this not from an expert point of view, but we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is, traditionally described as fight or flight, but I think is often or you can talk about it now as like a quick response mechanism. It's like our body primes us to respond quickly to a situation. This is we all know how this happens. You step into a road and truck's coming, you have to jump back. We do this even without thinking about it, because our body understands this is what we do. It's what we need to do in an emergency. Now, this was evolutionarily very helpful, and also, now we've co-opted that response to dealing with, snarky comments from colleagues, or like an email that has this kind of dismissive, whatever it is. We get stressed about all kinds of things. We read the news and we get stressed about something happening, in another part of the world that we have no control over, because we have that innate response. Now, balancing that is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and repose, or moving more slowly. And as we sit in meditation, and especially in the kind of a traditional cross-legged upright meditation posture that Zen talks about, although I also want to say you don't have to sit cross-legged to make this happen. It's not easy for everybody. I'm sitting like that right now, but it's not an essential. But the kind of the alignment, especially the upper half of the body, allows the slower, deeper breathing that Tessa was talking about. And I turned my volume down when we're doing the meditation, so I could do the sighing and the humming, because these are ways that the body actually knows to promote relaxation. But as we get still and as we relax the body, and especially with this kind of uprightness that comes from having a strong spine and having the hips higher than the knees, as we do sitting on a meditation cushion, that the relaxation that this kind of upright balanced posture kind of brings you to, it just naturally tunes the body to get the parasympathetic nervous system coming into play. And so we naturally slow down, even if our minds are still busy racing. Our bodies are actually like, oh, here's a slowing down time. I don't have to be doing anything. There's not a great amount of stimulus. I'm not engaging a whole bunch of muscles to keep me upright, because my spine's doing the work for that. And I think also, and again, I'm not an expert on this, because a lot of the nervous system is moving through the spine, that actually having a naturally curved upright spine helps the nervous system to do what it's doing. All those messages are running up and down the spine without any impingement. Whereas if we're kind of sitting like this, which I know I often do, or if we're sitting down looking at our phones like this, we're constricting our breathing. We're not allowing this kind of deep, slow, steady breath that we were just practicing to manifest. And when we do that, and when we think about the breath moving right through the body, then the breath is the breath is being monitored, and every breath, our kind of level of how much we're using the oxygen in our lungs gets sent out to the brain, that sends back to the nervous system, and so we're naturally relaxing. So that's how I understand the basics of it, and I hope Tessa can pick it up from there and run with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful entryway. And I think it's good to talk about that style first, because that's what so many people think of when we say meditation, is this perfect alignment of the spine and your legs placed just so, which is beautiful and not always accessible. Which you talked about, that it isn't always beginner friendly. And that was my experience. I thought that was meditation. That was the only thing that meditation was. And I tried it for a very long time, and it did not serve me. I just ended up ruminating and just couldn't focus, and my back hurt and my legs went numb, and it just wasn't what I thought it was. So I think a lot of people do that, where they think that this is the way that it has to be, and they try it and it doesn't work, so then they quit. So that's my experience, and that's what I know a lot of my students experience, and that's like what I like to teach to and talk to, because I don't think there is a particular way that we need to align the body. I think certain things help, of course, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but I think even from a yogic standpoint, yes, we talk about the easy posture where you're sitting exactly like you described, upright with the legs crossed, hips elevated. And that is one of the few asanas, one of the few So asana means pose. So the way that you physically place your body in yoga and Sanskrit is called an asana. And that pose, that seated posture is one of the few that is actually in the ancient scriptures. So it is very important. And it's not the only one. I know some people are a bit more lax with it. We're like, just sit on your couch, just lie in your bed. And my position personally is meet yourself where you're at. If that's what you need to do to have a moment, great. I'm not going to say you're doing it wrong. I don't think that that's helpful. And I also think that there are ways that we can help ourselves. Like if you're sitting on the couch and you usually watch TV there, it might be hard for you to suddenly start meditating there because we have these like energetic reminders, you know, the remote's right there. This is what we usually do when we're in this space. So to speak to the position, I think is also a reminder. So like when you're in a particular place or when your body is in a particular pose, it helps, those neural pathways are connected, right? So it helps to remind you, oh, this is the time for meditation. Even if it's like just a corner in your bedroom, like that sort of energetic reminder, I think is really more important than how you place your body. But just the actual physical location, I think can be equally as effective. And then all this is to say that in nidra, we practice lying down, which is how it has traditionally been practiced for millennia. That you do elevate the knees slightly. And again, that helps to keep that spinal energetic movement. That's a big part of it in yoga as well, keeping the energetic pathways open. Your chakra system and the major energy flows that correspond with the spine, essentially. So for me, as a teacher and as a student, the most important thing is that you have a straight spine. And so, yeah, hunching over or having other sorts of habitual postures might not be as helpful, but having the straight spine in whatever posture that looks like, I think can be as effective. Especially, I've worked with like populations with like PTSD and trauma and things where your body is a little bit less of a safe haven, perhaps. So to be told like, you have to look like this can be really hard for people, especially if that's a triggering position for them or just not something that's accessible because their bodies aren't shaped like that or their bodies aren't flexible or mobile enough to be put in a position like that for an extended amount of time. So that's a very long-winded elaboration on just posture from a yogic perspective, at least.
But I do want to add that, you know, I'm talking about a traditional ideal, which, you know, thankfully I'm able to do. Although, you know, I spent the early part of my life running and cycling, so sitting cross-legged was really hard for me to begin with. And eventually I managed to open up the hip muscles enough to do that. But, you know, when I first went to the monastery, there was somebody who spent 3-month training period sitting in a lazy boy because that's what worked for their body. And
Yeah.
nobody thought, oh, they're not meditating because they're sitting in a lazy boy, you know. So traditionally, yeah, walking, standing, sitting, and lying down are the 4 traditional postures talked about in Buddhism for meditation. And sitting in a chair, you can arrive at this straight spine just as easily as sitting cross-legged or sitting in a kneeling position as well. And I've had injuries in the past where I've had to meditate for lying down for a whole retreat, which certainly made the time go a lot more quickly than when I was sitting cross-legged because it is more comfortable, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So just to say that the way I'm talking about isn't the only way. And, you know, I have heard Zen people say, if you're not sitting in half lotus or full lotus with like the feet on the thighs, then you're not really doing meditation. It's like, I don't subscribe to that point of view. That's very kind of exclusionary. You know, I can understand the tradition that's coming from, and I don't think that's very helpful to, you know, a lot of people in their bodies.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. And that reminded me too, just like talking to injuries and so on, that is part of the yoga tradition, is asana, is the movement. So the stretching is and isn't a big part of yoga, but it does help to prepare your body. So that is why I think it has gotten so popular, and not just because we're more attuned to our physicality, it's just a more tangible thing that we can relate to, but it also helps you to release physical tension so that you can be more prepared for a meditative experience, so that your body is more able to sit in a particular pose, or so that you don't get as much discomfort or even like emotional and mental tension from your muscles, from your physical body. So that's a big part of it as well. So thank you for bringing that up too, is like this whole, like, we have to prepare this vessel for everything else that we want to do with it. It's not always a natural response or something that's naturally easy. Sometimes it does require some effort and some transition to be able to practice how you'd like to practice.
Well, that makes me wonder too, Tessa, if you can share a little bit more about, I mean, you've sort of touched on there are many different elements of yoga, and beyond, inclusive of it, but also beyond the one we think of as the, all of the moving between poses that we think of as yoga. Can you share more about what yoga nidra is and how that ties in with relaxation?
Yeah. So real briefly, just, yeah, one of my favorite things is talking about what yoga is. And because especially in our culture, we just have a very different idea of what the ancient tradition is. So the word yoga means to yoke or to join. A lot of people say union, so like union of the body, mind, spirit. But I think it's union with the divine, union with consciousness. So that sense of oneness, that's what the word yoga means. And it is a whole philosophy, not just a physical practice, but it's a whole spiritual philosophy about how to do life, how to be a little bit less in suffering and a little bit maybe more successful, especially when you're trying to obtain some sort of spiritual growth. So that's what yoga is. When I talk about yoga, it is this whole overarching tradition, of which, yes, asana is a part of, meditation is a part of. There's four, and from how I learned, there's four main branches of yoga, which I can talk about, but it's really not important. But some of them don't even include stretching or asana. Like bhakti yoga is just devotion, so it's the yoga of love and devotion. So like just chanting is a very common expression of that. So it just, I think it's important for us to just zoom out a little bit about what yoga is. So then part of that is, like, my particular pathway is more of the Raha yoga. So that's the 8 limbs. So the Ashtanga yoga, which isn't the physical practice of Ashtanga. This is when it gets so confusing, because we've taken all these words and attached brands to them, and it's not really what they are. But the 8 limbs of yoga within this one branch of yoga has a path ish where we can kind of cycle through them, or so it's like different constraints. So like ahimsa, non-violence, these sort of rules ish to live your life by, ways that you will be more successful if you show up this way. And then you kind of venture down, like pranayama is part of it as well. So breath control, breathing practices, asana, so the stretching practices, and then pratyahara, which is a inward turning of the senses. So shutting off your external senses so that you can go further inward. And then we get into different states of meditation, like concentration and focus, and then eventually samadhi, that experience of oneness, the experience of yoga. So nidra kind of follows this path. So in a yoga nidra meditation session, with the guidance that's presented, it helps, it vaguely follows that, which is quite interesting, but helping to turn you away from your senses, helping to turn you more inward into a more focused place, so that you can start to march further into a meditative state. So the guidance is designed to do that basically automatically. It's a form of like self-hypnosis. Actually, a lot of hypnosis was derived from yoga nidra practices. So you're completely in control, but the guidance is such that it allows you to start to detach from the physical, from the external, and you can end up in some pretty interesting experiences and situations and healing journeys, um, some deep sleep as well. But it's kind of a blank canvas for you to get what you need. That's been my experience, at least, is that it very much takes you where you need to go. And it's very gentle and it's very relaxing. So people find it really effective, especially when they're dealing with like some mental health issues, like a lot of anxiety, the PTSD, like I mentioned. It really helps to realign your relationship with yourself, especially when you're a little bit like chaotic or a little bit traumatized or just a little bit out of sorts. It really helps you to find that center and to develop that safe place again, so that you can begin to deepen your understanding of yourself and your understanding of the world and your understanding of yourself in the world and how it connects to everything else. So I find it to be really powerful and really accessible, and it is just one tiny little part of yoga to come full circle.
And it sounds like from what you're saying, Tessa, but tell me if I've got this wrong, that it's a practice that is particularly helpful to have be guided as opposed to trying to do it yourself, or can you do either one?
You can do self-guided, but it takes a bit more experience, because the whole point, well, the guidance prevents you from thinking. The guidance is there so that you don't have to think. So it kind of replaces your mental chatter. And that's why it works, because it overrides your thinking. Even though thoughts will still come in, your mind will still wander, of course, but there's that background anchor, like we use with the breath or with a body scan. It's the voice that is your background anchor. So once you begin to get, not even begin, once you become quite established in the practice and in there's different stages, kind of like I alluded to, you can self-guide, but it's challenging and takes a bit of effort, because you have to be able to guide yourself without thinking. So it's that kind of awkward balance that can be hard to do. So I definitely recommend doing a good long while with guided practices before you experiment on your own, because it can end up being really frustrating.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I pick up on something that Tessa said? So, these practices came around as a way to help us be more successful as human beings. And again, this is something that human beings, a couple of thousand years ago, spent a lot of time, working at, trying to figure out what is the best way to be a human being. And I don't think anyone's actually come up with any better ideas since then, to be honest. I think Buddhism and yoga, I say, rose around the same time. And, again, they're all about how can we, live in this human life. And, the Buddha's first realization was like, everyone suffers. There's no point trying to avoid suffering. There are reasons why we suffer, and there's ways we can avoid it. And, again, I don't think anyone's improved on that. And I think it's really helpful to remember, even though we think we're these kind of amazingly superior technological creatures, that really we are just animals at heart, animals with kind of functioning, physical systems that we tend not to pay very much attention to in our society, although thankfully there's a little more emphasis on that than there was when I was growing up in England, for example, a few decades ago. But actually, like listening to your body, understanding what's is going on and has gone on in your body. And Tessa was talking about trauma, and that's, it's very important to understand the things that have happened to us and which cause us to behave the way that we behave. And I think that greater understanding, which comes from doing that internal work, really does help us to maneuver through the world more successfully. Because we might think that meditation or any of these practices are kind of self-centered, self-focused things that we do, but we do them in order to be, more functional in the world, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I one of the things I love telling my students in class is that we don't meditate to get really good at meditating. we meditate so that we can carry that out into the world. And one of the things that comes up for me when I think about that with relaxation is sort of the connection between relaxation and what in 21st century living we would call self-care. And how and I'd love for us to just talk a little bit more about sort of the role of relaxation in the way that we go through our daily lives, and why it's important to make, if it's you believe, as I believe, that it's important to make space for that in your daily life, and suggestions that you have for people who are trying to find ways to take care of themselves with relaxation as they go about our incredibly busy lives. So whichever one of you wants to jump in on any part of that.
Right. Maybe so one word, burnout. That's the the word we keep hearing about. Whole generations of being burned out, and society is set up in a way that promotes that. Society is not set up in a way that helps us take care of ourselves or each other. And if we do self-care, it's again self-care so that we can help take care of everyone around us, not just that we're making ourselves feel better and everyone else can do what the hell they like. We're hoping everyone else has excuse me, this opportunity to thrive and flourish rather than just survive. And so one thing I've been thinking about, and I was actually doing this right before the conversation, is like, even when you're busy, if you have something you think is a chore, like doing the dishes, or as I was just doing, putting my laundry away, just take time to do it mindfully. And I notice, if I'm starting to get frazzled, like, oh my God, I got to do this thing at 10 o'clock, and oh my God, what am I going to do? If I actually spend, oh, I've got to get this stuff done before I can do this thing. It's like if I actually spend 5 or 10 minutes doing the dishes or doing the laundry or making my bed or whatever it is, just the very simple physical things, that just totally helps me relax me, because I'm doing it. If I do it in the sense of I'm going to mindfully pay attention to this thing, once I've done that, I'm going to mindfully pay attention to the next thing, rather than thinking this is some terrible problematic thing I have to get out of the way so I can focus on the thing I really want to do. And this is, again, it's part of the the Zen approach of fully inhabiting each moment, and practice isn't just practicing on the cushion, it's practicing in each moment wherever we find ourselves. And there's something about allowing ourselves to be in that situation, whether you're working in the in the monastery, you go and work in the kitchen, and it's like not just so that you can prepare the meals for everybody, although that's important, it's so you can understand that chopping carrots is as much of a meditative mindful activity as sitting on a meditation cushion. And so you can extend that to everything that you do. And I say I particularly like it with laundry or dishes or making the bed. It's like not just, oh, I have to get this done so I can do this other thing, or I have to get this done so I can relax. Like that's the other thing. Oh, I have to get all these things done before I can relax. Like, no, actually, you can relax while you're doing them if you approach it in that frame of mind.
I love that. And that's so interesting because so nidra is a practice from Tantra yoga, and the Tantra yogic philosophy is to see every part of your life as a sacred part of your life. So putting the dishes away is a sacred act, and to treat it as such completely shifts your mind, rather than like, something I have to do before I can get to the sacred part of my day or before I can get to the good parts. It's like, no, it's all the good part. It's all the important part. Yeah. And that's interesting that there's that overlap there. And then to speak to as well, it sounds a lot like kind of what you're talking about is, it's like our meditation cushion or your practice is training ground, right? It's like we have this like little bit of a workout for our mind, for our spirit, that we can then hopefully eventually take into other parts of our lives. So it's that self-care aspect. It is to take care of yourself and to take care of others. And then I think also to have a better life so that you can use these tools and these practices from this half an hour of your day and then expand it outward. So you might notice that, you don't get so much road rage, or when you focus on making dinner, you don't mind making dinner so much. So like starting to make those connections to from the practice into the rest of the world so that they become one and the same. I think that's kind of ultimate, not goal, but kind of like an overarching thing that can happen as you dive deeper into these practices and spend more time doing these practices. And that's really cool.
And I think that comes from an understanding of interconnection because, we're not
Hmm.
separate from the dishes. We're not separate from anything else. Everything is a part of the fabric of making us who we are. And certainly in Zen tradition, we do talk about treating objects with respect. Like, you'd hold things with two hands rather than just like, oh, here, have that. You're actually taking time and energy and attention to hold something with respect. And that, would start with your robes or your eating bowls, the various other, you know, things we think of as sacred, but then we do extend that to everything else because we know
Hmm.
we're not separate from everything else and we're not separate from anyone else. And so if we think of something as a lesser activity, then we're, disparaging, a lot of what we do, and when we start thinking of everything and everyone as sacred, then that gives us a whole different way of moving through the world.
Thank you both. I love that. I love the simplicity of of that what I'm hearing in both of your philosophies of just being fully with whatever you are with respect for it, and love for it. And that is something, as you're saying, that we can practice no matter who we're with or what we're doing. And that it's a practice that will fall down. Well, but that it's not something that we can only do if the circumstances are right,
And
which
to
I think is often an excuse we may come up with. Go ahead.
Right, and also to bring us back to our theme, it is an energy efficient thing as well. Like when we can do
Mm.
this, not like, oh, I have to do this thing. We practice and we do it naturally, and it's so much more energy efficient than kind of like making these choices about I have to get this done, I want to do this, I got to focus on that. The amount of mental energy that takes and the kind of physical resistance to doing the dishes or whatever it is. If we drop that and just do the thing that we're doing, that in itself is relaxation. And again, it seems like something extra you have to add, but it's actually stuff that you're taking away because you're not adding all the judgment about this is not a valuable use of my time, I want to be doing something much more valuable with my time. That kind of voice just drops away. And then my experience is when that voice drops away, there is naturally this, to bring back a word I brought in earlier, alignment, with the present moment, and that alignment is intrinsically relaxing for us.
Yeah, so much overlap. But yeah, the craving and aversion, right? It's just such a waste. Of course, it's human. Of course, we're going to do it every day, multiple hundreds of times, probably. But the more that we can notice it, or that we can even just be a little detached, it's like, oh man, that really sucks. But I don't have to let it ruin my day. I don't have to like go down a spiral of how much life sucks and how everything's out to get me and how nothing's ever going my way. I can just sit with this situation isn't pleasant. Okay. And then just kind of like, because that's part of life. We will suffer and there will be things that are unpleasant. So just rather than fighting it and trying to control it and change it and wish it were different, all that energy could just be going into accepting it and moving on, which, yeah, is, to come back to the theme, it helps to relieve a lot of that chronic stress that we're all living with, thinking that we have control over our lives and our experiences, when really the only thing we have control over is our reaction to them and our mindset about it. So if we can focus on what we can actually control with that energy, it becomes, yeah, a very liberating experience of life that we can then just accept and surrender to, rather than like butting heads with it every time we don't like what happens.
Yes, what's making me think of, Tessa, as you describe it that way, is that we often think of relaxation as something that we have to do.
Mm,
Like you were saying, Shundo, I'm going to do all these other things so that then I can go relax, right? Like, um, but that the alternative that I'm hearing from both of you is that relaxation is a letting go. It's not a doing more. It's a dropping the
Mm.
resistance to whatever is happening and being fully with your body, with the moment, with whatever is happening. And what's coming up for me, a question I'd love uh, to ask the two of you is, it seems to me that we could come at that from two different directions. We could come at that by, okay, I'm going to relax my body. I'm going to release the tension in my body so that then my mind can be helped to release and relax. Or we could go the other direction and start with our bodies and allow our, excuse me, start with our minds and allow our bodies to follow. And I'm curious, any thoughts, excuse me, you have about either direction, or if that's even a helpful way to think about it, as coming at it from those two directions.
I think sometimes it depends on what kind of mood you're in. Sometimes I can talk myself out of getting stressed about something. It's like, wait a minute, you don't have to do this. And then other times, the mind is so powerful and bossy, as I always like to say, and that it's really hard to get it under control. But what we can do is we can always focus on our breath and do the kind of breathing practices that Tessa was offering at the beginning. These like long, slower, deeper breaths, which do, you know, activate responses in the body, and those responses in the body move up to the brain. We notice, if we've practiced long enough, or it took me a long time to notice it in my practice, whatever is going on in the brain is reflected in the body. Like the body is feeling the impact of mental activity, whatever kind of mental activity it is, like excitement or stress or anxiety, gets reflected in the body. So we can do that in the other direction too. We can let the body do what it knows how to do to relax, which is generally speaking, deep breathing or lying down or being comfortable, and allow that to soften up what's going on in the mind.
Mm-hmm. I think they're both interesting pathways in, and I think calming, having your body tell your mind is a lot easier than having your mind tell your body, because there's things that we can do, asanas in particular, that will do that automatically. So like Shundo mentioned, deep breathing, so that will help we're talking about a vagal nerve response here, right? So we've got the vagus nerve that branches from the brainstem and then goes down through the organs, and they call it like the second brain, right? So we have this internal response system that creates a feedback loop. And I think it's easier to put your body in a calming position, and that will calm your mind. I think it does take quite a bit more training and discrimination, I think, to have your mind tell your body to relax. I think that's a bit more challenging. But just simple things like putting your legs up the wall, that will immediately relax you, because whenever the chest in particular, whenever the heart is above the brain, just like we were talking about with the hips being above the legs, whenever the heart is above the brain, the blood will change its flow and it'll pool in your neck, which will actually stimulate the vagus nerve. So then just by putting more pressure here, your heart rate has to slow, otherwise you'll have too much blood in your brain. So just using those kind of hacks, I guess, or those kind of cheats, I think are really effective, because you don't have to control anything. It's just a physiological response to your body, to where your body is positioned. So that can be really, really effective. And there's like different pressure points and things like that you can also utilize. There's tons of information about that right now, which is really cool. But I think that's, especially when we're talking about our culture and our current world affairs, I think it's a lot easier to utilize those sort of natural responses to calm yourself, because our minds are just crazy little monkeys. And that can be hard to tame.
I said there was one practice I used to do in the monastery when I was sitting in a meditation hall, and you weren't allowed out for like 40 minutes or 50 minutes, and I'd need to pee or something like that, and I'd be getting increasingly anxious about needing to pee and needing to leave, and I used to have to say to myself, I am okay in my body in this moment, and just keep repeating that that to myself until my body actually got the message. But as you say, it's a lot harder to do it that way around than
Mm-hmm. But that sort of self-talk is really helpful too. Like, especially again, I have a lot of trauma training, so to keep bringing that in, but like telling yourself, I'm about to relax. This is my time to meditate. Like setting yourself up, your mind, setting your mind up for that sort of experience, just like setting an intention for anything else. It just helps you to be fully on board with what's happening so that you can eliminate as much resistance as possible. But yeah, just that little self-talk, or like, this is my time. I have nothing else to do. I have nowhere to go. I say that a lot. There's nowhere else you need to be. And just repeating that to yourself can be really helpful as well. So I think you can use them both, right? You can tell your body that it's safe and it's okay, and your body can tell your mind that it's safe and it's okay, and it just becomes this, it just feeds on itself, which is really nice.
Yeah, and my favorite one at the moment is you don't have to rush.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fast moving kind of person generally, but like I just don't have to rush. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and all of these, both directions that we're talking about, it just strikes me that's so different from the tuning out that we mentioned early on, of when we often resort to numbing ourselves instead of giving our bodies what will, as you described, Tessa, it will actually help them to calm down, through the postures. That bring in, that activate the vagus nerve in a way that creates the positive feedback loop that we're looking for. And I'm so heartened that what both of you have described in these practices, whether they're physical or the way that we interact with our minds with the self-talk, that they've been around for so long. We know that for hundreds, thousands of generations, people have been using these practices to help themselves to relax, to be more present, to live their lives more fully, as an alternative to numbing out and tuning out, which is a response so many of us have when we're faced with all of the inputs of modern living. Is like, I just can't take it. I can't take any more of it. It's like, well, no, you shouldn't have to sit there and take it, but you also don't have to numb out. There are other ways to help your body.
Yeah. And can I put a plug in for nature?
Yeah.
So right behind me, you see a little lily. That I bought some lilies from the market a couple of weeks ago, and I don't often buy myself flowers, but I did. And the amount of pleasure, that even just looking at those flowers for a couple of weeks, this is the last one that's left, gave me, it's like, that was certainly worth the money. But, even living in the city, again, this is taking us back to our, evolutionary, like a little further back in the evolutionary thing, just being around nature, being by a lake, being by the ocean, being around trees. These naturally, you can read all the studies, they naturally relax us. And there's something about the fact that, we evolved in nature. As long as nature is, not full of saber-toothed tigers or snakes or whatever it is that might alarm us, there's something called, attention restoration theory, where we can be walking, which again is a wonderful activity. If you don't like sitting still, just walk, pay attention to what you're walking among. But if you're walking in nature, I think your mind and your attention naturally just like has a few things to focus on, but not very much. And all the kind of the frazzle that is going on in the background tends to drop away, because you've just got this very, gentle, soft, natural palette, whether it's ocean, whether it's forest, even, grass or botanical garden, whatever, anything like that it's naturally relaxing. This is part of the thing. Again, we might think we're, technological beings, but we're not. We evolved around nature, and that helps us relax, definitely.
The only thing that I love that specifically is just that inclusion of the five senses. I think that is a huge part of why it is so relaxing and stimulating at the same time. Like it's so can't think of the right word, but where it forces you to focus on it. Like it's just so all encompassing, because you can smell it and you can see it and you can taste it and you can touch it. And when we can have our full physical experience be about one thing, it's a really powerful, relaxation effects, but just a powerful experience of being present as a human, which I think is kind of what we're all doing here anyways, is in these practices, but can be very nice. And then I like to think about two other ways that you can have that same sort of experience if nature isn't maybe super accessible, but like how else can you have all your senses be occupied with one thing, like painting or cooking, things like that actually like encourage you to not have anything lacking, so that your whole of your being can be turned on this one focal point, just like you said, to eliminate those distractions, to quiet out that external noise, because I think that's so much of what we struggle with these days, is just so much information, so much stimuli, that when we can just simplify it, it becomes a relaxing practice in itself.
Yes, 100%. Yes. I'm already getting excited about making dinner tonight, Tessa, from you talking about it that way. But I think we're just about at the end of our time. So I want to thank both of you for being here, and would love it if you would share how people can sit with you through within, and anything else you want to share about other places they can find you as well. Why don't you start, Shundo?
Yes, I teach within at noon on Wednesday Pacific time, midday Zen style meditation. So I talk for a little bit. We sit in silence for about half the class or a little bit more, and then we have a little discussion time at the end. I also do mindful hikes around San Francisco. The group is called Roaming Zen. And it's on Meetup. You don't have to be on Meetup to come to the hikes. I also have a mailing list. If you Google my name, it's very easy. You can find me. I'm actually supposed to be doing one this afternoon if I feel energetic enough to do it, which I think I am now. I feel very relaxed after this conversation, so I think I'm feeling well, because I was feeling a little poorly last night. I think I'm well enough to do a hike this afternoon, and that's one of the ways I take meditation out into the world as well.
Awesome. And I teach at noon Pacific on Tuesdays. So, and it's right now it's a yoga nidra style class. So we do a little bit, especially this month with the theme being relaxation. I've been talking a little bit more about what the practice is and why it works the way it does, and how you can utilize, because it can be a little bit weird to think about this like talking style meditation. How's it actually going to help me in the world? So I like to speak to that as well, because it is a little less obvious than some of the other styles of meditation that we work with. And then I'm also the marketing manager at Within, so you can find me on all our social channels now. But that's the only class I'm teaching right now.
Fantastic. And we've also got a few things coming up at Within. We've got a day-long meditation retreat if you wanted to experiment with relaxing for a full day. It's actually happening at Green Gulch Farm, which is San Francisco Zen Center's branch up in Marin County, on Labor Day weekend. So I'd love to have you there for that day-long retreat. And then we've also got some new courses and classes coming up starting in September in our online studio. So I hope that we'll be able to keep exploring this topic of relaxation and all of the other bits and pieces of it where we went in this conversation, particularly about just being more fully present for what is, and really living fully and deeply. That's what we're all about out Within, regardless of the specific focus of each month. So I'm excited for both of you to keep teaching with us, and I hope that we'll be able to have you in a conversation again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.